On a cold, dreary election day in Baltimore, October 3, 1849, a printer named Joseph Walker was walking past a local tavern known as Gunner's Hall. Lying in the gutter, soaked from the rain and shivering uncontrollably, was a man in severe distress. The man was delirious, completely incoherent, and dressed in cheap, ill-fitting clothes that clearly did not belong to him. He looked like a destitute vagrant who had been beaten and left for dead. But when Walker rolled the man over to look at his face, he froze in shock. The man in the gutter was none other than Edgar Allan Poe, the most famous, brilliant, and tortured writer in America. Welcome back to Echoes of the Past USA. Today, we walk the foggy, gaslit streets of 19th century Baltimore to investigate a mystery that feels like it was ripped straight from the pages of a gothic horror story. How did the master of the macabre spend his final, missing days? And what truly killed him? The answers are darker than fiction. To understand the tragedy of Poe's final days, we must understand the darkness that followed him his entire life. Edgar Allan Poe was a literary genius. He practically invented the modern detective story and perfected the psychological horror genre. In 1845, he published his masterpiece, The Raven, making him an overnight household name across America. But fame did not bring fortune, nor did it bring peace. Poe was plagued by poverty, depression, and a severe sensitivity to alcohol. It was said that just one glass of wine could send him into a downward spiral. His heart was truly broken in 1847 when his beloved wife, Virginia Clem, died of tuberculosis. Following her death, Poe became a wandering, melancholy figure. Yet, by the fall of 1849, things were finally looking up. He had joined a temperance society, pledging to quit drinking entirely, and was newly engaged to his childhood sweetheart, Sarah Elmira Royster. He was preparing to start a new life. He just had to make one final business trip from Virginia to Philadelphia. On September 27, 1849, Poe boarded a steamboat in Richmond, Virginia, bound for Baltimore, where he planned to catch a train to Philadelphia. He had money in his pocket, a trunk full of his belongings, and a clear itinerary. He arrived in Baltimore on September 28th. And then, he vanished. For 5 agonizing days, Edgar Allan Poe completely disappeared from the historical record. He never boarded the train to Philadelphia. He never checked into his usual hotels. He never contacted his friends or his fiancée. It was as if the foggy streets of Baltimore had simply swallowed him whole. What happened during those 5 days remains one of history's most hotly debated mysteries. Did he run into old friends and break his vow of sobriety? Was he mugged in a dark alley? Or was he swept up in a sinister, organized criminal plot that was rampant in the city during that exact week? This brings us back to October 3rd, when Joseph Walker found Poe outside Gunner's Hall. When Walker asked if Poe had any friends in the city who could help him, Poe managed to mumble the name of an editor, Joseph E. Snodgrass. Walker immediately sent an urgent letter. When Snodgrass arrived at the tavern, he was horrified. Poe was a man known for his neat, gentlemanly appearance, always wearing a well-tailored black wool suit. But the man slumped before him was wearing a soiled, cheap, palm-leaf hat, a faded coat that was entirely too big, and scuffed shoes with no socks. His walking cane and his trunk were gone. Snodgrass noted that Poe's clothes looked like they had been forcibly swapped. Poe was completely incapable of explaining what had happened to him. He couldn't remember where his luggage was, where he had been, or who had given him the beggar's clothes. He was immediately rushed to Washington Medical College and locked in a barred room reserved for patients suffering from extreme delirium. Inside the hospital, Poe was placed under the care of Dr. John Moran. For 4 days, Poe writhed in agony, suffering from violent visual hallucinations. He held conversations with imaginary beings on the walls and trembled with terror. He was never lucid long enough to explain what had happened to him. On the night before his death, the mystery deepened. According to Dr. Moran, Poe began repeatedly and desperately shouting a single name into the dark room. Reynolds! Reynolds! Who was Reynolds? To this day, no one knows for sure. Was it the name of the man who attacked him? Was it an old friend? Or was it a hallucination of a character from his own stories? In the early hours of Sunday, October 7, 1849, Poe suddenly grew calm. He turned his head on his pillow, looked at the ceiling, and softly spoke his final words. "Lord, help my poor soul." And with that, the master of the macabre was gone at just 40 years old. So, what killed Edgar Allan Poe? The most widely accepted theory among historians is a brutal 19th century political practice known as Cooping. During this era, political gangs in Baltimore were notoriously corrupt. On election days, gangs would kidnap innocent men off the streets, drug them or force them to drink large amounts of alcohol, and lock them in a small room called a coop. The gangs would then force the victims to vote multiple times at different polling locations, changing their clothes each time so the election judges wouldn't recognize them. Gunner's Hall, where Poe was found, was an official polling place. This perfectly explains the missing 5 days, the severe delirium, and most importantly, why Poe was found wearing someone else's cheap, oversized clothes. If Poe was heavily drugged or forced to drink by a violent gang, his sensitive system would have completely shut down, leading to a fatal brain fever. While cooping is the most famous theory, medical experts have offered several compelling alternatives over the years. Some believe Poe died of rabies. Dr. Moran noted that Poe refused to drink water in the hospital, exhibiting hydrophobia, a classic, terrifying symptom of late-stage rabies. This would explain his violent hallucinations and his tragic death. Another theory points to a brain tumor. Decades after his death, when Poe's body was exhumed to be moved to a new monument, workers noticed a strange, hard mass rolling around inside his skull. While brains decay rapidly, brain tumors can calcify into hard, stone-like objects. A massive tumor could certainly have caused his erratic behavior, memory loss, and eventual death. Finally, some theorize he was targeted for murder. The brothers of his wealthy fiancée, Sarah Elmira Royster, heavily disapproved of Poe, viewing him as an unstable alcoholic chasing their sister's money. Could they have hired thugs to beat him and leave him for dead to protect their family fortune? We will never have a definitive answer. All medical records from the hospital have been lost to history, and Dr. Moran's accounts grew more exaggerated and contradictory as he aged. But Poe's mystery did not end with his burial. Starting in 1949, exactly 1 century after his death, a mysterious figure known as the Poe Toaster began visiting his grave. Every year, on the night of Poe's birthday, a shadowy figure dressed in black with a wide-brimmed hat and a white scarf would slip into the cemetery. They would pour a glass of cognac, toast the master's grave, and leave the half-empty bottle along with 3 red roses. This tradition continued in secret for 60 years, a beautiful tribute to the man who gave the world so much beautiful darkness. Edgar Allan Poe spent his life writing about the bizarre, the terrifying, and the unsolved. It is a haunting, poetic irony that his final days became his greatest, most enduring mystery. What do you believe happened during those 5 missing days? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and step back into the shadows with us next time on Echoes of the Past USA.